Jai Guru, everyone.
Hi,
Guru.
Guru. And welcome to another episode of Autobiography of a Yogi, Line by Line. We have Priyank and Chris here today. Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
No Mike today, unfortunately, but hopefully he'll be back with us next week. So last week was a great week because we started a new chapter. And I was thinking today how, we're actually quite far ahead in the autobiography of a yogi, aren't we? Even though we've been doing it for a couple of years. I thought, wow, we're on chapter 17 already.
Yeah, we're on like a third of the way through the book. Third.
Wow.
So many good chapters left to uncover. Definitely excited.
There's lots to look forward to. So yeah, last week we started chapter 17. Priyank, could you remind us what we covered last week?
Yeah, sure. So last week we had a gentleman by the name of Dr. Roy. He's a veterinary doctor, and he was convinced by his son and Mukunda to go visit Sri Yukteswar, who had the hopes of transforming his purely scientific attitude and go towards God a bit more. But he had this attitude where he wanted to go not for the right reasons, like with reverence, with an open heart. He kind of wanted to go with a bit of arrogance, or like wanted to kind of prove himself and the worth of science almost. And with that attitude he went, and through this we ended up seeing him, and then he said that he was going to die abruptly, and then he kind of extended, at Mukunda's plea, he extended his life by 6 months or so. Was it 6 weeks? One of the two. And he had a chance to be transformed or transform himself, but he didn't really take that opportunity. He went back to his old outlook, and then his fate did not end well. He passed, unfortunately. And then, which is in contrast to what we're going to talk about today, where Shashi is a kind of a different kettle of fish to this doctor, and then he gets also a different outcome where he gets to live to the New Lauren.
Yes. So here we meet Shashi for the first time in the chapter. And Guruji begins this section by saying that it was his proudest privilege to bring his college friends to meet his guru. And I was thinking just how amazing it would be to actually, one, have your guru in the body, but two, be able to bring your friends to meet him, the person that you are so devoted to and who you love very much, and you can bring your friends to soak in their divine vibrations. So it must be quite something.
Indeed, it must have been. And the word Guruji uses is pride, like my proudest privilege. And this is like a kind of a good type of pride, because he's thinking about, the welfare or the salvation of his friends, or, the ultimate well-being of his friends. So he's introducing or giving that, having that, he's proud of the opportunity to have that, true aim or endeavor. But it's in contrast to the pride with which we heard Dr. Roy, going to Sri Yukteswar. And that's the kind of pride that we're taught in society. Pride is generally like a negative thing, isn't it? We shouldn't be proud. We shouldn't show pride. Pride comes before the fall, as it was in Dr. Roy's case. But I think in this case with Mukunda, it's the right type of pride, isn't it? It's his relationship with his guru, and he's not, it's not really for himself, it's for Shashi.
And yeah, for the upliftment of his friends, right? And service to others is such a big part of the path. So he's really displaying that here. And, he's saying that it's helpful because he explains that most of them lay aside their, as he says, fashionable academic cloak of religious skepticism, if only in the ashram. I like that line because it's a subtle nod to how, oftentimes in intellectual circles or more scientific circles, there's a sort of seeming opposition between science and religion. whereas we're very blessed to know that they are harmonious and one and the same. But it's really lovely to know that his friends were very open-minded and that they could leave that at the door, so to speak. Yeah. So and then we meet Shashi, and he says that Shashi spent a number of happy weekends in Serampore, and that Sri Yukteswar became really fond of him, but he lamented because Shashi's private life was really wild and disorderly. Sort of makes your mind wonder as to what Shashi might have been doing. Although we can kind of have a guess.
Yeah, he'd probably fit in well with the London teenage scene.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe he was born in the West in another life and carried on the tendencies. And then we have a prediction from Sri Yukteswar, much like we did in the first part of this chapter. And he says to Shashi that unless he reforms, 1 year hence you will be dangerously ill. And he gazes at him with affectionate exasperation. I really love that tiny pairing of words there, affectionate exasperation. It reminds me of a parent with their child, and the child's not doing what he or she should be, and that parent is so exasperated but still full of love. It reminds me of that.
I must admit, I have affectionate exasperation quite often, but pretty much for the same reason with Sri Yukteswar here. Like, when you're giving sound spiritual counsel, you're pretty much parroting Guruji in terms of how you need to, live part of your life or meditation or all that stuff. And then people don't heed to that advice. And then you have that exasperation, you sigh. Like my sister and her husband are going through a very troubling time in their marriage right now, and they're like really like in a very negative place in terms of each other. And I've been trying to just like feed in Guruji's teachings about conduct, and this battle is really just a drama, and all that stuff. And they kind of get it, and then they like acknowledge it, and then they just in a few moments they just go back to their old way of thinking. There's only so much you can do.
Yeah, and it's shown here in the text what you've just said, Frank, isn't it? That the receptivity of the friends, I think, is then reflected in Sri Yukteswar's response to them. He did not react this way to say directly to our previous friend who had a different fate in the end. He really has gone out of his way, essentially, and not sat there dispassionately and sort of quiet and despondent. He's going to the other side of the spectrum, and he's gazing at them affectionately. So it just shows that the receptivity is everything, really, in this relationship that we have with the great gurus.
Yeah, and that there must be qualities within Shashi that Sri Yukteswar could see that were worthy of trying to get him to reform. Perhaps he was on the cusp of, maybe he was on the line of, okay, well, if he uses his willpower and he follows my advice, then maybe he can, overcome, or maybe he's just about on the other side. So, yeah. And he says here, Mukunda's the witness, and don't say I didn't warn you, basically. I'm sure we've all heard that from our parents at some point, don't say I didn't tell you so.
Yeah.
Say I didn't warn you.
Don't come crying to me when
it all goes wrong.
What is it? What's the saying? Like, wisdom is wasted on the elderly, something like that. Is that the saying? So or
wisdom falls on deaf ears or something.
No, it's like the youth, the mix of being youthful but no wisdom, and older and all the wisdom, and then being able to live your life with wisdom. But here, obviously, Sri Yukteswar's got the wisdom of divine wisdom. But it is quite comical, this line, isn't it? Mukunda's the witness,
Yeah. And then, Shashi laughs, which is an interesting response. Someone just tells you that you're going to be really ill if you don't carry on, if you don't change your ways. And he laughs, which is not the response that I would expect. And we have a reply, and he says, Master, I will leave it to you to interest a sweet charity of cosmos in my own sad case. My spirit is willing, but my will is weak. You are my only savior on earth. I believe in nothing else. Yeah.
Few interesting sections to that.
Yes.
The first of it is, I'll leave it, what did he say? The cosmos, something about the cosmos.
A sweet charity of cosmos.
Yes, I'll leave it to you to interest a sweet charity of cosmos, in his case, in his sad case. So they're kind of alluding to changing my fate, essentially, is what he's saying. So if this is my fate, I want you to, I trust that you will cater to my ultimate good. And he's almost saying, because he's referring to the cosmos, he's almost saying that it's up to you to influence the planetary devas and have mercy on, make them have mercy on my sorry case. So there's some astrology kind of thing there in insinuation.
And also for me, the childlike receptivity, or the saying, I'm essentially giving myself to you. The responsibility is what something Guruji talks about, where we have to be childlike in our approach to the guru and the teachings and so on. So we kind of take what they say in good faith and practice what they tell us to practice, essentially.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's like a surrender, isn't it? He does surrender, even though it's not in the truest sense, because he's not taking responsibility for the situation, because he could change it without bothering the guru, but he still surrenders nonetheless. And I love this line here. It probably applies to all of us. My spirit is willing, but my will is weak. I wondered at that, what that would mean. It's like it's a bit of a paradox, isn't it? Because Guruji tells us that our soul longs to go back to God, right? And yearns for God contact. But here he's saying that his spirit is strong, but his will is weak. But his spirit, your spirit is always strong, right? He doesn't even need to say that, because you always, your soul always wants to go back to God. It's your ego that interferes, and then your spirit, and then your will then loses out from that. But it's good that he acknowledges that, even though he doesn't follow through with what that actually means.
Guruji talks about. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go on. But the difference is with us. We could say the same thing, but we actually follow through in the sense that we are making the effort, right? Whether if we're doing our kriyas every day, if we're living Guruji's teachings, we don't not do what Guruji asks us and then say, "Oh, Guruji will take care of it." Surrender, and that's the incorrect type of surrender, even though it is good to surrender.
It's a step in the right direction, isn't it? At least. Yeah, I took this as like my will is the little self's will with a small s, but the big S is the divine will, and that divine will is always strong, just like you said about the spirit praying. So it's the lack of tapping into the divine will, which is the sort of essence of the problem there. So yeah, receptivity.
I remember there's that really lovely line where or a lovely passage from Guruji and one of his disciples, that he kind of went, the novice disciple may rationalize that since the Guru is divine, the Chela cannot hope to emulate him. One such disciple, asked by Paramhansa Yogananda to perform a task that he considered beyond his ability, protested and said that he could not do it. And Guruji's response was quick and emphatic. I can do it. But Gurudeva, you are Yogananda. You are one with God. The disciple expected Paramhansa Jesus to say, yes, you're right. Just take your time. Eventually you'll succeed. But Gurudeva replied, and this is the famous line, there is only one difference between you and Yogananda. I made the effort. Now you have to go and make the effort. And so it's really the case here, isn't it? Shashi needs to make the effort, doesn't he? But he doesn't, and you can't. Guruji apparently never permitted disciples to say words like "I can't" or "I won't," which is like a negative, self-fulfilling kind of prophecy, isn't it?
Yeah, this section of what Shashi says, it just affirms that thing of, we can be very loyal and have a lot of faith in the guru, but we can't expect them to do things for us. Well, we can, he does, but whether that's the right thing to do or not is another case. I personally feel that, it's a two-way street, and we have to make our effort, and then Guruji can help us. There was this thing that I wrote down from one of our episodes a couple of weeks ago. It was the chapter about astrology, and we were talking about how we can overcome our our fate or the planets. And there was something I wrote down. I think it was something that one of you brought forward, and it says something along the vein of, I place myself in the aura of Guruji's grace. I use my free will to help myself, and then Guruji can help me. And I've got that written by my bed, because we have to do our 25%, right? We can't just say, oh, you can. Or in this case, we see what happens when we completely say, oh, well, I'm not going to reform, right? Can you do it for me? And suffering ensues, right? So maybe it saves some time as well. But here we also have the topic of willpower, right? And it's such a big thing in Guruji's teachings. And I found a reading here on willpower. And Chris, would you be able to start us off?
Will is the switch that controls everything in this universe. If you don't exercise your willpower, you will be a weakling, easily influenced by your environment. When you develop will, no matter how you are pounded down by life, you will rise again and say, I am successful. I can win.
Choose a good, wholesome, constructive goal, and then determine that you are going to achieve it. No matter how many times you fail, keep on trying. No matter what happens, if you have unalterably resolved, the earth may be shattered, but I will keep on going, keep on doing the best I can. You are using dynamic will, and you will succeed. That dynamic will is what makes one man rich, and another man strong, and another man a saint.
The greatest will should be used to meditate. The Lord wants us to discover our divine will and use it to find him. Develop this God-seeking dynamic will. It is not profound words that will give you emancipation, but your own efforts through meditation. So there, it seems we must make the effort and do our part.
Is it just me that thought about that took it personally when it was, determine, construct a goal and then determine that you're going to achieve it no matter how many times you fail? Was it me that just took that personally and thought, okay, well, which ones am I going to do? Okay, I'm going to do the energization exercises twice a day. This is my goal. I can do this. This is achievable. Because
Yes.
one thing about goals that I've heard about is you have to be humble enough to start as low as you need to. And I think that should be emphasized in the sense, but yeah, what popped into my mind was twice a day energization exercises. We talked about that just before we started.
We've all got different places where we need to apply our will, isn't it? You know, when you said, did I just take it personally? I thought you were going to talk about all the ambitious goals you have for your eco village. I thought, oh, I sympathize because you have huge goals.
Yeah, I think putting God first, I always try to think of, when I think about this and my shortcomings, I always think of my spiritual shortcomings, of which there are many, and everything else is if God permits it.
Don't tell
Right.
Barbara this.
Putting that first will put her first.
Well, yeah, that's true.
I'll be a spin doctor for hire.
So then, here we're reminded to use our willpower, and poor Shashi recognizes that his will is weak. But I have to say, his faith is very commendable in the Guru, in Sri Yukteswar. You know, when he says, "You are my only savior on earth, and I believe in nothing else." You know, he really believes that Sri Yukteswar will save him from whatever fate is going to come his way, and no matter what, you know, Sri Yukteswar can persuade the cosmos to, you know, help him.
Yeah, we could be pretty critical of him, to be fair, but it's actually a really good place to start.
Yeah.
And many people actually don't even start on this footing. And Guruji talks about the loyalty, you know, elements like this are, it's the highest law, and having faith in the Guru and so on is critical. And maybe many people don't even start there. So I'm pleased to see it.
Yeah, he's got sort of the natural loyalty of a disciple, hasn't he?
Yeah.
A devotee,
He's got the
is
stuff
very
that counts.
commendable. We actually have some readings here on faith. Chris, would you mind reading it?
Faith means total trust, intuitive conviction, and knowing from the soul that God is real and that his help is ever ready to flow into man's life. Faith is very important because receptivity to divine power is shut off by negative thoughts and doubts. Faith grows as you exercise it. And when you have faith, you can do everything. If you can hold on to an idea long enough and do not give up when opposed by contrary evidence, even if the whole world says it is impossible, if you can fight the negative thoughts of people and keep your own thoughts strong while working toward your goal, it will manifest.
Hold to the helm of faith, and mind not the buffeting of untoward circumstances. Be more furious than the fury of misfortune, more audacious than your dangers. The more this newfound faith will work its dynamic influence on you, the more your slavery to weakness will wane proportionately.
Very nice, thank you both. And then Sri Yukteswar goes on to provide Shashi with some advice, and he advises him to wear a 2-carat blue sapphire, and it says that it will help him. And yes, Priyank.
Yeah, so blue sapphire is something that I also got told to wear recently. So it must be to do with one of the planets, Shani, I think, Saturn, that gets in the way of various things. So my sister got sister-in-law. She got told to wear ruby, red ruby, and she made it part of her wedding ring. So she's got and I just asked her recently, because I was reading this chapter, and I said, you know, you wear that pretty stone, but you know, you should don't just wear one that looks nice. And she's, oh no, it's you know, one of the planetary things. I was like, oh yes, she's in the know.
He knows.
But she's made it in, like, she's integrated like the tradition of the ring, you know, wearing a wedding ring, and made it into her whole life thing as well, which is quite nice.
Question: does it have to touch the body itself, or if it's in like a, I don't know what you call them, but like a little holder on a ring, does it still count if you're having that connected to the gold or whatever?
No idea. But the Navaratna, which is the 9 gems and the stones that Sri Yukteswar wore, and that's the one that cost like $30,000. That one, it's got sapphire and all sorts of other things. That one is like encrusted on like a metal. So that one's, I don't think it's touching your skin. It goes around this band, like on the out. It's like a very decorative piece. So maybe with these stones, they just got to be near you. I don't know. I'm just guessing. But whereas with the astral bangle that we have, it's got to be touching your skin. But also, of course, if the stone is on a piece of metal and the metal is touching you, then it's like by conduction. You could say it's touching you anyway. I don't know. If listeners know, to let us know. But yeah, Lauren, you may know. Tell us.
I don't know, but someone I do know said that they went to, so I think is it. I don't know the name of these people who work with the stones and the planets, but they said to wear a particular stone for this person and to wear it close, like next to the skin. So maybe there is something about it.
I'm just asking because I did buy my wife an emerald. Part of her ring has an emerald in it from Brazil. She's Brazilian, but to your point, Frank, maybe I'm missing a step if carrying this ring and it's doing harm instead of good.
Consult. I don't know about well, you should definitely consult. If you believe in it, you should consult an astrologer.
I actually
pass me details after the podcast, Frank.
Okay.
I can. It's interesting. It's only sort of come to me within the past sort of week or so when we've been doing this episode, but years ago my parents wanted to buy me a ring for my birthday, so it was a special birthday, so I got to choose what ring I wanted, and I was very drawn to this one, which is a blue sapphire, right? And in the recent years, I noticed it was very, very subtle, but whenever I would wear the ring, there was like a very subtle change in my consciousness would be saying too far, but there was a positive sort of subtle change within me when I would wear the ring. And now reading this, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, there are lots of qualities within stones. I'm not sure if mine is 2 carat or what carat it is, but it is a blue sapphire. I thought, oh, how interesting. I never thought anything of particular stones having qualities. At the time I wasn't on the path or anything. It's interesting what we're drawn to, isn't it?
Maybe use your intuition, but not everyone can wear every different type of stone. It's like specific for each individual.
Yeah. Interesting. I'd like to know more.
She was talking, the astrologer that I was speaking to was saying like the time of birth and where you're born. They map it on a chart, and then they look at the constellations, and then they see what's the influencing planet, and then from the chart they can then put stones. Depending on where you are on the chart, then you can wear those stones which counter X, Y, Z, and so that's why like Shani, Saturn isn't necessarily bad for everyone. It's only bad for some people. Like it's bad for me, but not necessarily bad for everyone.
Yeah. Wow. And in this case, Sri Yukteswar's advice is to wear a 2 carat blue sapphire. And then Shashi says that he can't afford one. And, anyhow, dear Guruji, if trouble comes, I fully believe you will protect me. So again, another example of his faith in Sri Yukteswar. And then Sri Yukteswar gives another prediction that in a year he's going to bring 3 sapphires and they won't be of any use then. Yeah, Priyank.
I find that there should be a natural gap in between these two lines, because the first prediction that Sri Yukteswar says is not prediction. He's kind of saying, okay, if you wear a 2-carat sapphire, blue sapphire, I'll help you, right? And then Shashi says, I can't afford one, and you're going to help me anyway. And then in the next line is, in a year you'll bring 3 sapphires. So I feel like at that point, until Shashi said that, Sri Yukteswar had to like, if Shashi had said, okay, yes, I will wear one, then this 3 sapphires thing wouldn't have come to pass. I feel like the whole, he's had to intercede in his life at this point, because like he said no, so he's not going to wear one. And then Sri Yukteswar's had to change the course of events, and because he's now going to interject, he's now going to, because we know how this ends, right? He's now going to intercede in Shashi's life and essentially allow him to live. But he's saying, like, you refuse the 2, and now you're essentially going to bring 3 and force me to help because they're going to be of no use to you. So I feel like in between those 2 lines, like the course of events changes.
Yeah. And it's not just a conversation that happened one time, right? It says here that it took place regularly, this sort of conversation. And apparently in comical despair, Shashi would say, I can't reform.
This is where what I said earlier, in giving him credit, begins to fray. If, as Priyank said, you've got this great guru and saint avatar in front of you saying, hey, you should do this, and you say no, then you're slipping down this path of well, there's some kind of inevitability of disaster there, right? And you're now not heeding the advice, direct advice. So you're kind of foregoing the good favor. You're starting to forego the good favor. And, it's said, though, in a comical way, and I just want to pick up on the tone here, that my take on the tone is that there's still somewhat of care and love and almost comical fashion or something. And I think it's of the underlying faith and trust and, all the things that we mentioned before that Shashi has still. So it must still carry, significant weight in there where we're obviously going to unravel. But I just want to flag that as soon as you go down this road and you're sort of foregoing your own will freely and knowingly, it's a treacherous path.
I mean, actually, Shashi's willpower is quite strong in some ways, because Sri Yukteswar again and again is telling him to do something and he's saying no, he's not going to, and he believes that Sri Yukteswar will.
All that will.
Yeah, so kind of he's got willpower, but in a different way. Yeah, Priyank.
But Chris, this blue sapphire may have been pretty expensive for Shashi and his family to afford. So can you imagine if I told you, Chris, you need to wear a 20-carat diamond around your neck for the rest of your life, like someone,
to save my life? I mean, the thing that popped into my mind was priorities. I don't think Sri Yukteswar would have recommended it if it wasn't achievable.
Yeah.
Because I thought about that as well. But I mean, I think I shared a bit of an intimate detail on somebody very close to me having gone through stage 4 cancer and brain cancer and then passed away. And the pride sort of came before the fall there. And in this sense, you've got Sri Yukteswar telling you, hey, go do this, you'll be okay. This will save you some issues. I don't know. The idea of priorities kind of did pop into my mind that I'd probably go beg, well, maybe not steal, but I'd definitely beg and borrow to be able to get this thing and get myself back on the right track. Easy to say.
Yeah, true. This this line where he says, "My trust in you, Master, is more precious to me than any stone." I wonder how much he could stretch this, because they say faith moves mountains, right? And say he didn't want to wear, or he didn't, he didn't wear this stone, essentially. He didn't buy this sapphire, 2-carat sapphire. But he if he had replaced that with unflinching faith, and following Sri Yukteswar's every teaching, and reformed his life, his habits, potentially he would have not needed to do this. Obviously you're changing a lot of parameters there, but the reason I say that is because how this turns out later is that he's essentially lost faith. He's going he in the end he goes and goes back to Sri Yukteswar and goes to his feet, and he's going through the illness and all that stuff. So he kind of at some stage he loses his faith, I think, and then he has to buy his his tail between his legs and go buy 3 sapphires. I know we're getting ahead of the story, but he must have at some stage lost a bit of faith. But if he'd retained his faith, maybe he would not have suffered this fate.
That's interesting. I was going to say the opposite, Priyank.
Oh,
I was
yeah,
going
go
to
on.
say that actually he did have a lot of trust in Sri Yukteswar because he carried on with his habits that weren't very helpful, and then trusting that Sri Yukteswar would help him. And then when it all went wrong, which we'll come to in a minute, he still goes to Sri Yukteswar and has that full faith of, you are going to help me, and I know you can. And he does.
Yeah, but I feel like that's that, when you're on your deathbed, it must be easy to then surrender all your willpower.
Yeah.
But the real test is when nothing is, there's no trial, there's no tribulation, everything's going smoothly. Can you listen to your guru's words? You got time right now, meditate. I'll just watch a bit of TV first.
Well, I guess for him that was kind of, he was thinking, oh well, I'll just carry on with my life. Sri Yukteswar knows I can't reform, and he'll help me and he'll make changes. But it goes to show that no, actually, yes, they can intercede, but you still have to go through your karma, right? If you're gonna have those habits, they come with consequences. And really, I think his downfall came afterwards, right? Which we'll come to next. So we come to the next part where we get quite a woeful Sasi, because he's about to experience the effects of his actions, shall we say. So Mukunda is with Sri Yukteswar, and they're at one of Sri Yukteswar's disciples' houses. This disciple was called Naran Babu. I tried to Google this person. I couldn't find anything. I got a lot of LinkedIn pages and things that weren't.
They weren't veterinary surgeons, were they?
It might have been. And so in the morning, about 10 o'clock, Sri Yukteswar and Mukunda were sitting in the parlour on the second floor, and the front door was heard to come open, and Sri Yukteswar immediately straightens up very stiffly, which is quite a response. So he obviously knew what was coming. And
I think he must have known exactly what's coming. You're right, but I think at the same time he has to play the role. The Leela, he still has to carry on reluctantly with gritted teeth, perhaps.
Yeah, and he says, "It is that Sasi," he remarked gravely. It must be hard for Sri Yukteswar because he really cared very deeply about Sasi, and he really tried to warn him. It's not as if he had a conversation once with him and Sasi didn't respond and he just left it. He really tried to help him, and Sasi didn't take his advice, and that must be really hard as a guru to witness that. I think that about Guruji and all of the Param gurus. They watch us make all these mistakes, and it must be difficult. It must be kind of painful in a divine way to watch your children suffer so much and your disciples suffer by their own hand. So yeah, and Sri Yukteswar says that the year's up, his lungs are gone, and he's ignored his counsel and tell him I don't want to see him, which is very harsh in a way, but Sri Yukteswar has his reasons. What do you think, Priyank?
This is why I fear Sri Yukteswar the most, because look at that. That is one heck of a cold shoulder, isn't it? That you do not want to be on that side of the icy response. But somehow Mike sees past. He's a stronger man than I. Sees past these lines and sees divine love behind the ice.
Yeah, we're seeing a story unfold of a soul that has gone through quite an intimate, close relationship with Sri Yukteswar, having favor with him and so on, and then getting hit with this. If this doesn't hit home, because the previous story, what did we see? We saw somebody who thought was saved, and then in his saving, disregarded the help essentially that he received and threw it in the bin. And so, for all we know, that might have happened here to some extent, possibly. Who knows? I'm just throwing this out there, speculating. But what a lesson to learn as a soul to keep that where you want to heed good advice when it's given. You'll never not do that in any future incarnations. And we're all witnessing this unfold as well. So the lessons come in many variations, but this one's, it does hit hard for sure.
And Guruji recounts that he was half stunned by Sri Yukteswar's sternness, and that he raced down the stairway, and then he meets Sasi, who's coming up, and Shashi, sorry. And Shashi says, "Oh, Mukunda, I do hope Master is here. I had a hunch he might be." And I really like this line because there's a hint of intuition in here from Shashi. You know, he has a hunch where Master is. And that's quite a big thing to be able to hear your intuition and then be able to act on your intuition. So it does show a living relationship that he has and an inner receptivity, as you were saying before, Chris, that Shashi has. And I think obviously, I mean, it probably came from Sri Yukteswar, but you have to do your part and listen, right? And he acts on it. So
some kudos for Shashi, because faith, especially the deeper the faith, the more intuition, I suppose, you will gain. And so he had a lot of faith in Sri Yukteswar, didn't he? Regardless of his will being weak in terms of doing what he's being told to do, but his faith was strong. And so he had this little glimpses of intuition, I imagine, but quite strong on his deathbed.
Yeah. And then, Mukunda says to him that Sri Yukteswar doesn't want to be disturbed, and Shashi bursts into tears and brushes past him and throws himself at Sri Yukteswar's feet, and he places 3 beautiful sapphires. So Sri Yukteswar's prediction comes to fruition here, and he says, "Omniscient Guru, the doctors say I have pulmonary tuberculosis." And then he says that he only has 3 months to live, and he humbly implores his aid. He says, "I know you can heal me."
Why do you think he went on a limb and bought the extra sapphire? The requirement was too young, Shashi. Do you think he's like, "Oh, I'm late. Let me just get 50% extra. Let me see if that has more of an impact if I get more than what Sri Yukteswar or what needed me to get."
It kind of also tells me how would he have been able to afford 3 when he said he couldn't afford 2 just 1 year later. Suddenly he's, the priorities change and you can do it, whenever you're faced with the challenge.
But not being able to afford it was just my theory.
Totally.
I think he says it, doesn't he?
Oh, does he say?
Says, I
Oh, no, he does actually. Yeah.
I can't afford one.
Right.
I can't afford one anyway, dear Guruji, if trouble comes.
Right. Now I can afford 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're beautiful,
Yeah.
He didn't spare anything.
Well, I suppose if you're about to leave the body in 3 months, doesn't matter about spending all that money on 3 sapphires. I
Mm.
feel like it also comes from his guilt, perhaps, at not having heeded his guru's words. And okay, well, you wanted 1, I'll give you 3 just to show how willing I really am now. And Sri Yukteswar's response is pretty to the point, and you could say a little bit cold. And he says, "Isn't it a bit late now to be worrying over your life? Depart with your jewels. Their time of usefulness is past." And then he sat sphinx-like in an unrelenting silence, which apparently was punctuated by Shashi's sobs for mercy. It's quite a scene, I can imagine, in my mind.
Very much so. Just it's distressing to imagine Sri Yukteswar just not heeding to your prayers in this way, just like testing you. It must be obviously he's testing him, but I think what it says, how long passed, probably like an hour or something. I don't know. It's a long time passed, but I think I don't think I would have been able to sustain it for more than 10 minutes. I'd be like, okay, fine, I'll have to just suffer my fate.
You say that, but then if you were actually in that situation, which I hope you never are, but if you know you have only 3 months left to live, maybe you would do anything that you could and just stay at the feet of your guru and just implore his help, right? Because it's all you have left.
But
Nothing
an
else can
hour,
help you.
Lauren.
Yeah, it's a long time.
I just feel so bad that I'm wasting his time. Like he 6 months of him trying to convince me and I didn't listen.
Yep.
And now when I'm forced to listen, I just feel so guilty. And if he's not even looking in my direction, I just feel like this is just, I don't want to waste any more of his time. I don't know, that's just
But Shashi does have a lot of faith in his guru, doesn't he? And we keep getting reminded of it. And Guruji says in this next section that he had this intuition that Sri Yukteswar was actually just testing the depths of Shashi's faith in the divine healing power. And that, you well remembered, Priyank, a 10th hour later, Sri Yukteswar turned a sympathetic gaze on Shashi. So he looks at him, and I love this next line. It makes me kind of giggle. It amuses me. "Get up, Shashi. What a commotion you make in another person's house." Oh, it's just quite comical, really, isn't it? And he tells him to return the sapphires because they're unnecessary and to get an astrological bangle and wear it. So again, the bangle comes in. Yeah, Priyank.
That's so interesting, isn't it? Because I think what must have happened, because he's now interceded the second time, or probably the time that he knew he was going to intercede like a few months ago. Now's the actual time where he's interceded, because at this point in time, before he said this, he still had this pulmonary, whatever it was, this lung disease.
Tuberculosis.
But then he said these words, and then he must have interceded, right? And now he's saying you don't need to wear these sapphires, they're useless essentially, but you do need to wear an astral bangle. So it feels like he didn't initially say right at the start you need to wear an astral bangle and sapphire. He just said just the sapphires. Now he's saying just the astral bangle. So I feel like he's interceded. This is the point where he's actually interceded, and he's probably cured him. But for the healing to last, I feel like there has to be some support of like something else, and this is why the astral bangle is there.
So is this alluding to that jewels are perhaps less strong than an astrological bangle? Like, is it saying, okay, initially to overcome, whatever it is you need to overcome, so in Shashi's case, his bad habits and what's going to happen as a result, to wear a sapphire. But now that it's come to pass and his karma really is at play, he needs something else, which would be an astrological bangle. And is that to say that the astrological bangle has more strength? than a sapphire? Is that why he now has to wear that instead of the sapphires? It's just a question. I don't know because I'm not sure about how any of this works. But just a
No
thought.
idea. No
If
idea.
someone does know who's listening, please let us know. And then he tells him to fear not, because in a few weeks he shall be well. So you can imagine what that must feel like for Shashi hearing that.
Could there's another theory I've got about why this astral bangle is like before Shashi didn't want to wear or didn't want to buy the sapphires, right? But now, like, Sri Yukteswar has got him kind of pinned. He's at his worst. He's willing to listen to anything. Like, give up anything. Shashi would have been like, yeah, fine, of course I will. And now he's like, he already knows that he's going to get better. But he knows, for example, that for Shashi's life, he's going to need an astral bangle just to ground him and, support him through his life. As just as the same reason why we wear one. But if he says it now, then going forward, even after this illness, he'll benefit from it. And so I can convince him to wear it now as well. Maybe.
That's a good point. Yeah. And it's a good a time as any. He definitely will say yes now, right? And
yes, sir. 3 bags full.
Exactly. Not 3 sapphires full, though. And so when Shashi hears this, apparently he, smile illumined his tear-marred face like sudden sun over a sodden landscape. Such poetry, that line. And he asks Sri Yukteswar if he should take the medicines, and Sri Yukteswar says, basically, if you want to take them, do, and if you don't, it doesn't matter. It's as impossible for you to die of tuberculosis as it would be for the sun and moon to interchange the positions. So here we have another line. We had a similar line to this before, and I was trying to remember where it was from. I couldn't remember, but we did have a similar line to this in the autobiography before from Sri Yukteswar.
I think it was to do with Mukunda.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And then he says to Shashi, "Go now before I change my mind." It reminds me of that parent figure again, when you ask the parent for something and you keep going on and then they let you have it. And then they say, well, do X, Y, Z before I change my mind.
Scary, isn't it? Scary. Usually they do it. Usually parents do it when, or teachers do it when, like, it's very light. It's a light-hearted consequence. Yes. Here it's like life or death. Life or death.
Yeah.
There's no boundaries for jokes.
Yeah. So then we kind of expect things to get drastically better, but actually they don't, because after Shashi goes, Mukunda visits him, several times, and he's aghast, as Guruji puts it, to find that he's getting increasingly worse. And this reminds me, sometimes things get worse before they get better, if you're going through something. And then the physician who's tending to Shashi says that he won't last through the night. And apparently Shashi looks very thin. He's reduced almost to a skeleton. And that sends Mukunda straight back to Sri Yukteswar. And apparently he tearfully reports Shashi's condition to Sri Yukteswar.
The fact that Mukunda is tearful, it just shows that he's got so much compassion, doesn't he? He feels for his brother disciples just as a guru would feel for us, or that he would feel for us now. So it's just such a divine mother aspect that he portrays, even from like his young, teenage years in the book to now, isn't it?
Yeah. And Sri Yukteswar replies saying basically, why are you bothering me? Why do you come here? You've already heard that I'm going to heal him and assure that he's going to recover. So there, again, we have a slight difference, don't we, in the faith in the guru here between Shashi and Mukunda. Shashi is very firm from the very beginning that Sri Yukteswar is going to heal him, and that's what he's going to cling to, and it's more precious to him than jewels. Whereas here, you've got a moment where Mukunda's thinking, oh no, he's getting worse. Is he going to be healed? That sort of slight doubt, which I think is understandable, you know, given Shashi's condition. I think many of us would do the same. But yeah, it's another reminder, isn't it, to keep the faith. So Mukunda bows and goes to the door. And I think here comes an important moment. So it says, Sri Yukteswar said no parting word, but sank into silence, his unwinking eyes half open, their vision fled to another world. And I wonder if this is when he is healing Shashi. What do you think, Priyank?
So do you think this is the first time he's intervened or the second time? Because, you know, before when he was at his feet, and then he kind of had that moment with him, I felt like that was a intervention at that point as well. And then whether or not he had planned to have this second intervention, this is obviously just theorizing, whether or not he planned to have this second intervention, we don't know. But if he didn't plan to have this second intervention and that it was needed, that would mean that something has happened to Shashi in this time. He may have regressed with his faith, maybe, may have doubted, maybe, or like the family might have tried something that he wasn't supposed to do. Astrologically or like even physically, like medication or other rituals or something like that. So it could be that Sri Yukteswar had to intervene again, because if he's going into this, because these words are very clear, aren't they, in terms of him needing to intercede at this point. He said no words, but sank into silence. His vision fled into another world. Eyes unwinking. You can just imagine it. I think we've even got some pictures of Sri Yukteswar that like he's meditating and he's actually looking like exactly what's described here, and it's pretty scary. But yeah, it could be. Well, I personally think this is the second intervention.
And it's also potentially a very good learning moment for Mukunda. He sees how ill his friend is, and then he goes to his guru who says he will heal him, and then when he returns he finds that he has. So perhaps also it was a divine demonstration, not only for Shashi but also for Mukunda. And when he goes back to Shashi, he's astonished because he finds him sitting up, he's drinking milk, and he says, what a miracle. 4 hours ago I felt Master's presence in the room. My terrible symptoms immediately disappeared. I feel that through his grace I am entirely well. So we have the miracle healing. So that's what I wonder happened when Sri Yukteswar went into the silence.
This reminds me of the quote that you gave Lauren earlier that I think you probably heard from Priyank about being in the aura, did you say, of Guruji? What was the line that you said you wrote by your bedside?
Oh, I place myself in the aura of Guruji's grace.
Yeah, and the will kind of being done.
I use my free will to help save myself, then Guruji can help me.
Okay. Kind of slightly different, but yeah. Just
Oh,
being in the place of the aura of a master and having their presence must be so healing.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't think, Lauren, I'm quite certain that wasn't me.
It's not a direct quote, but it was things that we talked about.
Or maybe one of the gurus dropped it into your psyche.
Yeah, and I created a little affirmation from what we'd spoken about, because it was so powerful. I thought, yeah, and you talked to
it is really
it was either
powerful.
you, Chris, or Mike. You were talking about placing yourself in the aura of Guruji's grace, or making little notes.
Do you remember that, Chris?
I think she's hearing the best kind of voices.
Yeah, I think so.
I also have another note that I wrote from that day, which I have, and it
Guruji's
says, I can overcome any limitation because I created it in the first place, and I possess spiritual resources that are not subject to planetary pressure. We were talking about the bangle, weren't we?
Divine inspiration.
And also Kriya Yoga.
we're going to actually talk about inspiration that comes from meditation, and maybe you're manifesting that for us right now.
Maybe,
In the
maybe.
next episode, we'll talk about that.
But here we have Shashi, and he is healed, right? And in a few weeks, he was stouter and in better health than ever. And then there's a footnote which says in 1936 that the Guruji heard from a friend that Shashi was still in excellent health. So we know that it's something that was long lasting. But here comes the sad but, I feel. Apparently, his reaction to his healing was tinged with ingratitude, and he seldom visited Sri Yukteswar again. A friend of Mukunda's told Mukunda that one day he so deeply regretted his previous mode of life that he was ashamed to face Master. There's a lot of guilt and regret.
Yeah, which goes back to what I was saying, contrary to what I was saying earlier on, that Sri Yukteswar and his awareness would have known about this most likely, right? But he did it anyway. And Guruji talks about this, where we have to put our past behind us and start from today. And the saint is a sinner that never gave up, quote I've said probably 100 times, I'll say 101 times. Because I think everybody has a degree of this shame or guilt element with regard to sin that we carry, that we have to dispose of entirely. But yeah, it is a pity to see.
The whole guilt paradigm, if you recall, from a talk by one of the monks recently, has no place. I think it was in convocation last. Has no place on the spiritual path.
Because that was during a young adults meeting.
Oh, was it? Who did
one of the monks?
The nuns. Was the nuns? I think one of the nuns said it in our young adults meeting.
It was the monk. It was not the last monk's visit, but one of the ones before, and it really stuck with me.
Yeah, because I often suffer with guilt as well, but then no more. But the reason he said was, we've talked about this in the podcast before, but the reason he said was because if you've done something wrong or that something that is worthy of guilt, you've paid, right? You've paid your debt. In sense, Shashi has led wild life or whatever he was doing, his habits and his way of life was not conducive to Guruji's teachings. So he suffered this horrendous illness, right? He was on his deathbed and he was about to die, and it would have been untold pain and suffering, right? So he suffered a lot. Yeah. So now he's already paid a debt, and then now like his guilt is making him pay another debt. Of like he's suffering with this psychological trauma of having the feeling of guilt, and he's so much so that he's paying again. He's not having the grace of Sri Yukteswar. He's not like going to see him ever again. So he's already paid the debt, but now he's going to pay again essentially because of his guilt. But if you'd removed the guilt, and if we all remove our guilt, then probably easier said than done, but we can actually benefit. We can actually benefit from the life lesson that we've already paid and the debt we've already incurred, and move on, and we can actually overcome what caused us to have that grief in the first place.
It takes a lot of humility, doesn't it, to go back to the Guru when you know you've done wrong. And I think particularly, and I think this is where guilt comes in a lot, perhaps within our own lives. I know it does for me when, it's one thing to do wrong when you don't know. Okay, like you don't know that it's wrong. You don't have any consciousness of that. But then it's ignorant when you're ignorant. Yeah, thank you, Chris. I was looking for that word in my mind. I find it. Thank you. But then it's another thing when you know the advice from your guru and you don't do it, and then you suffer and you do feel bad. Well, I have
even worse
in the past, because it's like I know I did wrong, and I knowingly did wrong. It wasn't as if I was ignorant of it. I know what Guruji's advice was, and I didn't follow it. And now I'm suffering, and it's my own fault, right? And I think that can make us feel that feeling of like guilt or shame of, you know, purposely not heeding your guru's words. But Priyanka, I think you're right. This is such a good reminder to us that actually, if you have the humility to go back to your guru and look him in the eye, and like with all of your flaws, and he loves us, right?
You know,
when we take that vow of discipleship, he knows all of our shortcomings, and he
yeah.
chooses to keep us there with him. So if we could just go back to him and be back at his feet, we will give ourselves the honor of being in his grace and his blessings.
You know, if anybody wants like a separate reading on this, I was telling you guys just before we started recording, I'm reading the little booklet. I don't think my camera's going to allow it to focus in on it because I've got the blur background on. But it's the Overcoming Character Liabilities, Sri Dayamata. And if you turn to page 8, Train the Mind to be Objective, talks about self-pity. And it's essentially the topic that we're talking about now. And I was sort of skimming over it whilst you guys were talking there, trying to find the specific line in there. But I'll leave it for the listeners and the viewers to find themselves. It's only a page and a half long or so in a small booklet, but it's such good advice that essentially God doesn't want anything from us but to try, keep trying, to keep trying, to keep trying. And that involves to put aside self-pity. And it's so relatable for all of us, isn't it? We've all got at those moments where we need to sort of self-flagellate, is the word. Yeah.
I'll give you a chance to find it, Chris.
Shall I?
What you said, Lauren, about being humble and going back to the guru after you've erred. The one thing that would stop us, this feeling of guilt, if we're actually talking about why we wouldn't go back, is because of feeling ashamed or feeling like your ego doesn't want to feel ashamed. So it's actually like a double negative, double downside, because you've got this whole feeling of guilt it's not going away. At best, it's going to be suppressed to manifest in some horrible way in the future. And B, then you're also catering to your silly ego, where you're ashamed and you don't want to give up this bit of pride as well, right? That you don't want to go back, essentially go back to the guru on your knees, essentially asking for forgiveness. In your mind, that's how dramatic it probably is, but it isn't like that, because as you said, Lauren, your Guruji knows about our strength, and he knows about our weaknesses, and he knows how much Maya, how strong the influence of Maya is, and if you really appreciate that the God's love for us is unconditional, then there's no sense that we should feel ashamed to go back and seek for forgiveness.
Yeah. And the main thing is that we learn our lessons, right? Sorry, Chris. Yes, okay, you've made a mistake. Okay, but what have you learned from it then? And what will you do next time? Just a quick thing so I have my phone up here because I have on the screen, I have what we're going to talk about today, and then on my phone I also have the comments, so I can just look at both at the same time. And as we were talking about kind of overcoming all of this stuff, one of my friends sent me an SRF talk of overcoming karma, and I saw it pop up and I thought, oh, that's very timely. So that's one to watch later. Chris, did you find it?
I find it.
Yay.
So thanks for the time. So page 12 on this little booklet, Sri Dayamata, Overcoming Character Liabilities. I mean, this is on point, exactly what we're talking about today. It's the topics are, hard hitting, and she delivers it in such a soft way. It makes for beautiful reading. Talks about self-esteem, training the mind to be objective, this idea of self-pity. But she also talks about, on page 11, a balanced attitude towards mistakes. So on page 12, you can read, Do not be too quick to condemn yourself. Everyone makes mistakes, and I don't think God cares even a little bit about them. He is concerned only that we desire and strive to be better. He seeks from us the resolve. Lord, I may falter again and again, but I'll go on trying to the last breath within me.
Thank you, Chris. Wow. Yeah,
Nice.
very timely. Thank you. Yeah, I almost want to end the episode on that note, but I can't because there's one tiny bit left of the chapter.
I should have held back.
No, never hold back in that regard, Chris. So the last tiny bit says, I could only conclude that Shashi's illness had had the contrasting effect of stiffening his will and impairing his manners. So that concludes the section for this chapter. There's actually been quite a few strong examples of lessons for us in this section, and I think that's the beauty of some of the well, there's lessons in everything that Guruji writes, but the anecdotal ones is that, you know, the lessons become quite clear, but in quite a easy to access way. You know, there's no language that people may not know or may feel, you know, sort of not alienated by, but that kind of thing. But here you've got a story and we can relate to it, and I found it really helpful reading this, so I'm really glad to have gone through it. And we've got more to look forward to of the chapter, haven't we, Chris? What are we looking into next week?
Well, Guruji has an artistic way of weaving into the stories together, weaving stories together throughout the chapters, where they're kind of heavy and then they're kind of light, and then they're kind of heavy and then they're kind of light. And we're going into a bit more of a light moment in the next part of the chapter, where we're going to look at Guruji's absence from his studies and college life, and how Sri Yukteswar's guidance there on how to navigate this issue really leads him to use his intuition, and we'll talk about meditation and inspiration that we can take from it. And so we'll talk about doubts and positive thinking, and we'll have readings on faith and confidence in there as well.
Sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. Is there anything that anyone wants to add before we conclude today? Nope. Well, thank you very much, both of you, for a lovely episode, and for everyone who's listened, and looking forward to the next time.
Thank you very much, Lauren and Chris.
Yeah.
Jai Guru.
Thank you.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.